Hello my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and tonight I've got another book talk video to share with you guys. And today we are talking about The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This book came out a few years ago, and ever since it came out, I've heard people talk about how much they loved it. And sometimes when that happens, it makes me a little wary to pick it up, because when something's so hyped, then you read it, and your expectations are too high, and then you never love it as much as maybe you would have if you hadn't heard all the hype. But anyway, I've got a podcast on Spotify called THC Library with my friend Krista, and when it was my turn to pick a book, I picked this one because I really thought she would like it, and I know she hadn't heard much about it, so I kind of went into it as she would. I tried to forget everything I'd heard about it and just read it. So there's an episode of that up on the Spotify, which I'll link below. But I also wanted to do a book talk on it because I know not everyone that watches my videos listens to the podcast, and that's totally fine. But I loved this book so much that I wanted to make sure you guys heard about it too. So we're just going to get on into it. How the book talks work are, I'll give you like a brief synopsis, some of my thoughts, and then we'll get into the spoilers, because I know a lot of you guys love hearing the spoilers as well. Alright, so Addie LaRue. The book starts in 1714, and Addie is a young woman living in France. Adeline is her name. She lives with her mom and dad in the small town of Vian. And when she's really young, like 11, 12, she goes to market with her dad a lot. Like, her and her dad are really close. He's a woodworker. He makes beautiful things out of wood. And she's got a really close relationship with him. And we see what life is like during this period in France. Now, the major plot of this book is one night, when Addie is at her lowest, she's about to be kind of married off to this man named Roger who had a wife, but she died, and he's got a bunch of small kids, so he is in want of a new wife. And everyone's kind of like, Adeline would be perfect for this. And it's about to happen, and she can't bear to let it happen. And so right before she sort of runs out into the woods, and one of the characters that we meet, her name is Estelle, and she's kind of like the town witch, like just a wise woman that lives in this little cabin. And she has always told Adeline, you do not pray to the gods that answer at night. So, like, keep your praying to the daylight hours. But when Adeline is out there, afternoon/evening kind of slips into night, and a demon appears, and he's very handsome. Adeline used to draw him when she was a child. She'd draw this man in her notebook over and over and over again, and then that's who she sees when he appears. So I'm guessing like he knew that and shifted himself to look like that. And so she's begging, pleading, praying that she wants her life to be her own. She doesn't want to belong to anybody. And yeah, she wants her life to be her own. She wants to be free. Now, if movies and books have taught us nothing about demons, it's that you have to be very careful about the way you word things. Very careful. Because if you're selling your soul for anything, that demon he's gonna want to trick you. He's gonna want to make what you're trading for not what you think it's gonna be, you know? So of course that's what happens here. And how it works out is, since Addie said she wants to be free and belong to no one, and live her own life, what he does is he makes it so that anyone who looks at her, when they turn away, they won't remember her at all. So the deal at its essence is she'll live a long life forever until she's tired of it. And when she's tired of it, he will get her soul. So of course he's trying to make his end, like he's trying to make what he gives to her miserable enough that she won't want to live for too long, you know? So anyone that turns away from her no longer remembers her. She can't say her own name. She can't write her own name. She can't write anything down. If she breaks something, it's instantly fixed. If she's walking for many hours a day, which does come to be for a while in her life, and her feet are aching and they're blistered, instead of her feet strengthening and getting tougher over time, every night it resets. And so every day the pain is fresh again as she's walking and her feet are blistering. So of course she doesn't know this at first when she makes the deal. So he disappears. She starts to learn the contract as she starts to try to engage with people in this town. Her parents, she goes to the house. They're like, who are you? We don't have a child. She goes to the town witch, and Estelle, her good friend, who warned her about this, even though it's accidental when she does pray to this night god. And, she kind of gets Estelle, not into remembering her, but into helping her. And Estelle's like, okay, I'll be right back. She goes into the house, but of course when she comes back out, she doesn't remember the exchange they just had. So the book is basically Addie trying to navigate her way through this life that she has for as long as she wants it, and it goes for hundreds of years, until one day she goes to a bookstore in New York City in sort of present day. It's 2014, but modern times, and somebody remembers her. So we'll get to that in a second. But that's all I'll say if you don't want any spoilers. I loved it a lot. It's 5 stars from me. I like how it kind of left the ending a little open for if there's going to be another book. 'Cause I know V.E. Schwab does write series, and I would love to read another book. My friend Krista and I in the podcast get into one book that we would like to read from her, which I'll get into when we get to that part in the spoilers. But 5 stars. It's clever. V.E. Schwab is an incredibly talented writer. I haven't read a ton from her, but I have read some, and every one that I've read has been 5 stars. So I was a little, like I said, wary about this one just because it was so hyped, but it's also 5 stars, and I'm only sad I didn't read it sooner, but I'm very glad I got to read it with Krista. It was a fun experience. So if you don't want the spoilers, now's the time to click away if this sounds like something you would be interested in. Definitely check it out, and if you do, come back and tell me what you thought. And now that they're gone, let's get into it. So, the day that she made the deal with the demon who she comes to know as Luke, because the picture she used to draw, that man in her mind, his name was Lucien, so she calls him Luke for short. That deal happened on July 29th, 1714, and so that kind of becomes her and Luke's anniversary date. And he shows up on that date every year. Well, not every year, because they go through periods where time passes between, but especially I think the first year he definitely comes and keeps checking in, keeps waiting to see if she is ready to call it quits. But she's stubborn. If nothing else, Addie is stubborn, and she's not gonna fold that easily. She's not. So we get to spend time with her and Luke. We get to see her moving through life being unknown, literally. When she said she didn't want to belong to anyone, she wanted her life to be her own, he took that literally. So how things start to happen for her, like if she's out one night and she meets a man she really likes and they hit it off and they end up going home together or something, well, if she really liked him and it was a good experience, she'll go back there the next night and it will happen all over again. For him, it's the first time, but for her, it's a repeat. And there's this emptiness that comes, of course, with not being known. She gets to know these people, but they know nothing about her. One thing that's really interesting too, as time goes by and we get to meet all of the different people that are important in her life, is at the beginning of each part of the book, I think the book's broken into like 5 or 6 parts. At the beginning of each part, there's a piece of art and there's a blurb about it. And it took me a few times to understand that these pieces of artwork all throughout the 300 years that Addie is alive, there are about her photos, songs, not photos, she can't be photographed, but paintings, songs, things inspired by her, even though the artist doesn't know why they're inspired by her, because of course they don't remember her. So anyway, one day she goes into this bookstore, and one of the things that has become commonplace in her life is that in order to survive, she has to shoplift food, necessities, clothes, any of it, because she has no way to make money or even have a home, because when she sees someone, they immediately forget her. So we see one time she tries to get a week's stay at like whatever the equivalent of a hotel would have been back in the 1700s. And so the owner makes her pay a week in advance, but then a few hours later, they come bursting into the room because they don't know why it's occupied, because they don't remember renting it to her. So she's shoplifting everything that she needs, because like even if she takes something and someone sees her and they go to call the cops, when they turn around to start dialing the number, by the time they're halfway through dialing the number, they don't know what they're doing. So she goes into this bookstore and she decides that she's going to steal a copy of the Odyssey that's entirely in Greek, because at this point she's learned many languages throughout her, in 2014, that's 300 years on this planet. So she steals it as usual and leaves, and the shopkeep, a man named Henry, he's like, excuse me, like, but she keeps going because she knows as soon as she's out of sight he'll forget her. But he follows her out into the street and he's like, what are you doing? And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, you just stole that book from my store. I just watched you do it. And she's like, nope. And eventually he's like, you know what? Keep it. If you are stealing an old Greek copy of the Odyssey, you clearly need it more than I do. Go. Anyway, the next day she goes to return it, like as in pretend it was a gift and get a refund. So she walks in, Henry's there. She's like, my friend gave me this and I'd like to return it because I already have a copy. And he's like, are you kidding me? Are you being serious right now? And she's like, yep. And he's like, I watched you steal it yesterday. And all of a sudden, everything kind of crumbles inside of her, and she's internally freaking out because this man remembers her. And he says those words, like, I saw you do it yesterday. I remember you. And she's shook, to say the least. So they start spending time together, and she's trying to figure out how or why he can remember her. But she's so excited and happy about it that she's just so grateful. So then we start getting some chapters from Henry's point of view, and we learn there's something off about him. And quickly we know he's also made a deal, but we don't know what the terms are. Because everywhere this man goes, everybody loves him. Women want him. Not just women, like men want him. Couples will see him in a bar and they'll want to take him home with them. Just, he can do no wrong. People are obsessed with him. And we learn through time that his deal had been, he always felt as though he wasn't enough in any aspect of his life. He felt like his parents weren't proud of him because like his brother was a doctor and his sister was this, and he's just kind of floundering. And he had a long-term girlfriend named Tabitha. He proposed to her and she says no. And he's like, well, I thought you wanted to get married. And she's like, I do, but not to you. Which, that sucks. That would be such a hard blow to have to withstand. So one night, on his darkest night, he comes into contact with a demon it's Luke, it's the same demon. And what he asks for is to be enough. He wants to be enough. He wants the people in his life, he wants to be what they need from him. And so as time goes on, like I said, everyone's throwing themselves at him. And it gets to a point where it gets old really quickly. And he starts to question them, like, what do you like about me? And they'll start listing off qualities that he just doesn't have. And so he pieces it together that they're seeing in him whatever they need, which is how he's enough for everybody. So if, like, one of his friends, she's like, you're such a good listener. And he's like, I know that is bullshit. I know I'm not a good listener. So it starts to wear on him. So, and how he can tell when it's happening is they get a fog over their eyes. It looks almost frosty, icy. And he knows that something is happening that isn't real. So anyway, him and Addie start spending a lot of time together. We're also getting flashbacks again to Addie and Luke. Again, it's a lot more of like showing up, getting in fights, spending 30 years apart. The house gets burned down at one point. At one point, they spend like 16 years straight together, just entangled in this incredible love affair, Addie and Luke. And me and Krista in the podcast were like, we need to know more about that. Like, how about a novella about those missing 16 years? I need details. Anyway, so as time goes on, Henry and Addie are sort of trying to work, well, Addie at first, she's trying to work out the details of how, like, he of course wants her to meet his friends and to come to parties, and she's like, well, this is going to be difficult because, as we know, when someone turns away, they forget her. But she manages to skirt the issue if it's a small enough party in a cramped enough space at first. But eventually she goes to a party, and then the next day, her and Henry run into his friend Robbie, and Robbie's like, who's this? And Henry at first thinks he's being rude, and he's like, what are you talking about? You met her last night. And it's in that moment that Addie knows she has to either make up a lie and then have to lie to him forever, which she doesn't want to do because, of course, this is the first person who's remembered her in 300 years, or tell him the truth. And she decides, you know what? I'm just going to tell it to him. And as we know from what we've seen him going through, interestingly enough, he's like, I also made a deal. So he believes her. So at this point, we still don't know really the terms of Henry's deal, like how long he has. Like, we know Addie has however long, but we don't know how much time Henry has. So as time is going by, Addie can, she's finding out these things about Henry that she can tell him her name. And in doing that, she starts to tell him her story because she's never been able to tell anything about herself to anyone. And he starts writing it down. Anyway, July 29th, 2014 rolls around. So that's her and Luke's anniversary in the present day with Henry. And Addie and Henry seem to think that they've outsmarted Luke in some way. Like, he doesn't know that we've connected and that we're in love. And even though Henry's in love, but Addie's just kind of happy someone remembers her. But anyway, she feels like that this is happening at all. There's been some kind of glitch in the system. But of course, that's not true. Of course, Luke has orchestrated this whole thing. It's a new way to mess with them, basically. So Luke tells her, like, you found Henry, that's great. Addie's kind of like, don't take him from me. She's like, and he's like, don't worry. Like, you got him for a lifetime, but some lives are shorter than others, Not every life is a long life. And she's like, what are you talking about? And then she finds out that the night that Henry made the deal with Luke, he only made it for a year. Why? If you're going to make a deal with a demon for your soul, you wouldn't make it for longer than a year? So anyway, she finds out he's only got 36 days left till his year is up. So the day after that, she summons Luke because she got this ring, this whole thing. She has a way to summon him that she rarely uses. She only used once back in the 50s, or not the 50s, during World War II. When she ended up in a Nazi prison camp, she used the ring then to call him to get her out. And she's using it now for the second time, and she wants to try to make a deal with him. He's like, no way. Nope, nope, nope. She's like, let him out of his thing. And so eventually it comes to her that the deal she needs to try to make is that if he lets Henry live, if he gives him a second chance at life, then she will surrender to Luke. She will go with him. Because there's a few things going on here. One, she likes Henry a lot. But again, he's still not enough. Because she's not affected by his, curse. So, she likes him a lot. But what she really likes is that he sees her and remembers her. So she's kind of like, yes, give him a second chance at life and I will go with you. Because in her heart, in her soul, she loves Luke. And so eventually he concedes. So when the night comes and it's time, Henry is ready to be taken, Addie tells him, you don't have to worry. It's not, I made a deal. You're not going tonight. And he's like, no, why did you do this? So, and then Luke appears and they kind of go off, and then we get a bit of a fast forward and we see that Henry is living his life. And he's written a book, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And he gets an agent, and then publishers are what's it called? They're it goes to auction. All the publishers want it. He gets a nice advance. He decides he's not going to put his name on it because it's not his story. And that kind of gives him the meaning in his life that he had been looking for. And then we see another sort of flash forward, and we see Addie in a bookstore. And she's watching a couple of teenagers, talking about the book and how much they love it, and, who's the author. It's, a whole thing. When they leave, she steps forward, and she's skimming through the book. And then Luke arrives, and he's like, time to go, girl. And then we get her inner thoughts. She's like, I'm going to wear this man down. I am going to annoy him so much for the next however many hundreds of years, until he eventually sets my soul free. And yeah, that's kind of where it ends. And like I said, it leaves an open space for another book, which, who knows? I hope that happens. I would love to read it. And this cover's so beautiful. And I just really enjoyed reading the book in general. I got lots of tabs here, if you can see, for what was our podcast discussion. And it was just so good. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, let me know. And if you made it to the end, put a little star in the comments. And I hope you're having a great weekend. And I will see you again real soon with another spoiler-free book review. No. Next is going to be my May wrap-up, then a spoiler-free book review, and then another book talk. So we got lots of fun stuff coming up. Bye, guys.